Now onto the story of the day. Oscar Pistorius has started serving prison time for the killing of his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison in the High Court in Pretoria today. Pistorius' family say they have accepted the sentence handed down by Judge Kgosi Masipa. His legal counsel says they expect him to serve at least 10 months. The National Prosecuting Authority has welcomed the fact that Pistorius will serve time in jail and says it will decide in the next 2 weeks whether to appeal his conviction. Now, for more on the story, we cross live to our reporter Griselda Lewis, who is at the Kgosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria, where Pistorius is spending his first night behind bars. Now, Griselda, what's currently taking place at Kgosi Mampuru prison?
Well, a very good evening to you, Tabile, live here from the Kgosi Mampuru prison in Pretoria, where Oscar Pistorius is spending his first night behind bars, we understand, in the hospital wing in a single cell here at the correctional facility, of course, after Judge Kgosi Masipa had sentenced Oscar Pistorius to 5 years for culpable homicide and an additional 3 years sentence for 5 years on the gun-related charge, that of course relating to the incident where Oscar Pistorius fired a gun at an upmarket restaurant. And certainly a far cry here today, what we saw from the celebrity and the fame that Oscar Pistorius has so become accustomed to. Oscar Pistorius was whisked away from the North Gauteng High Court in an armored vehicle surrounded by a lot of police. And according to the experts that we have spoken to, they are saying that Oscar Pistorius will spend at least 10 months in jail, and then after that he will then become eligible to apply for parole. And of course all of that will happen in consultation with the parole board that he would need to go before. And Riva Steenkamp's family also would play quite a critical part in what decision the parole board does take in the event that Oscar Pistorius, after that 10 months, does apply for parole. But certainly as well, in terms of all of that, we're going to take a look now at what Judge Kgosi Masipa said, but starting first with her saying that the court needs to send a clear message that the law is applicable to all. Let's have a listen.
A sad day for this country if an impression were to be created that there was one law for the poor and disadvantaged and another for the rich and famous. I know this was not the submission by counsel for the accused, as he specifically pointed out that the court had to weigh all the relevant factors before deciding on the appropriate sentence. There was, however, a feeling of unease on my part as I listened to one witness after another, placing what I thought was an overemphasis on the accused vulnerability. Yes, the accused is vulnerable, but he also has excellent coping skills.
Griselda? Back to you, Griselda. We seem to have lost Griselda. Griselda, are you still there? We'll be back with Griselda a little bit later on. Now, Twitter has been abuzz all day with regards to the sentencing of Oscar Pistorius. Let's take a look at some of those tweets. The ANC Women's League says the ANC Women's League will be making submissions to the state on our view that an appeal in this case is in the interest of the judicial system. Zwelinzi Mavavi says, I feel Masipa put all of us in a class today and educated all. Can't falter her judgment. Eric Paulson says Oscar Pistorius only 5 years imprisonment seems low for such a serious crime. As usual, celebrities get better treatment. Tulani says rhino poaching, more than 20 years in prison, murder less or equal to 5 years in a fancy prison cell. Wow, hashtag just saying. Karen says, thanks Oscar Pistorius for reminding the world that female lives aren't worth very much. Hashtag domestic violence. And finally, Ntokozo Mbata says, bottom line is no amount of jail time will ever bring back a precious life lost. My prayers go out to both families. Now, those were some of the tweets. We're going to try and get back to our reporter, Criselda Lewis. Criselda, are you still there?
Yes, Tabile, a very good evening to you once again. And you heard, of course, there from Judge Kgosi Masipa on the sternness and what the court certainly needed to prove today to reassure South Africans that all are equal before the law. Now, we see some of Judge Kgosi Masipa when she handed down that sentence, when she said, of course, that addressing the seriousness of the offences that Oscar Pistorius was facing. Let's have a listen.
The seriousness of the offences. The accused was found guilty of 2 offences, both very serious. In respect of the charge in count 1, the accused was convicted of culpable homicide. Counsel for the state correctly referred to negligence in this matter as gross negligence that bordered on dolus eventualis. On his own version, the accused knew that there was someone behind the door. He had heard the window slide open. He had heard the toilet door slam shut. He had heard a noise coming from the inside of the toilet. It would have been different if he had just heard a noise and assumed that something, maybe a stray animal, was in the toilet. In this instance, the evidence shows that he thought an intruder was behind the door. Using a lethal weapon, a loaded firearm, the accused fired not 1, but 4 shots into the toilet door. It is so that in his evidence, he said he would have fired higher if his intention was to kill. And this court accepted that. However, that does not change the fact that he knew the facts above and that the toilet was a small cubicle and that there was no room for escape for the person behind the door.
And then Judge Kgosi Masipa referred to several cases to establish Oscar Pistorius' degree of culpability.
The degree of culpability or blameworthiness exhibited by the accused in committing the negligent act. Relevant to such culpability or blameworthiness would be the extent of the accused's deviation from the norms of reasonable conduct in the circumstances and the foreseeability of the consequences of the accused's negligence. At the same time, the actual consequences of the accused's negligence cannot be disregarded, close quote.
Well, Judge Kgosi Masipa was also very critical of Oscar Pistorius when she said that Oscar Pistorius, given that he had taken, for example, a competency test when he was acquiring his guns, he knew when and when not to fire through the bathroom door.
The Foster matter, the accused did not know that there was a person behind the door. In the present case, the accused did. He stated that after he had heard the bathroom window slide open and the slamming of the door, the noise or movement in the toilet confirmed to him that there was someone in the toilet. 2, in the Foster case, only 1 shot was fired and it had been aimed above the roof, not into the door. In contrast, the accused in the present case deliberately fired 4 shots into the door.
Well, Judge Masipa, in handing down her sentence, finally said she needed to take into account what society would think, of course, take into account what society would say if the court did not hand out the sentence earlier. Certainly, she had ruled out any indication that Oscar Pistorius would be placed under correctional supervision as the defense had wanted.
Mr. Pistorius, please rise. The following is what I consider to be a sentence that is fair and just both to society and to the accused. Count 1, culpable homicide. The sentence imposed is a maximum imprisonment of 5 years imposed in terms of Section 276(1)(I) of the Criminal Procedure Act, number 51 of 1977. 2, on count 2, the contravention of Section 120, subsection 3B of the Firearms Control Act, number 60 of 2000. The sentence imposed is 3 years imprisonment, wholly suspended for 5 years, on condition that within the period of suspension, the accused is not found guilty of a crime where there is negligence involving the use of a firearm. Paragraph 3, the sentence in count 1 and the sentence on count 3 shall run concurrently.
Well, of course, Tabile, for the past several months, I have not been alone outside the North Gauteng High Court here in Pretoria. There have been hundreds of local and international journalists who've been reporting on the story that has gripped both local and international headlines. And of course, amongst the crew that has been outside the North Gauteng High Court, I'm joined now by my colleagues Manqoba Mchunu on my left there, as well as Patricia Fasagi here in the middle. Certainly, guys, it's been an exhausting couple of months. Manqoba, of course, I think, let me start with you. Surely going to be a very difficult evening for Oscar Pistorius, away from the comfort of his uncle's Waterkloof palatial home.
Well, certainly, Griselda, he's always known the life of comfort, not obviously all his life, but as soon as he had accomplished his dreams as an athlete, he has always known that life of comfort. And so to suddenly change from that scene and come to a prison, it's certainly not going to be easy for Oscar Pistorius to adjust. It's certainly going to be difficult, and it will take him time to even adjust to such settings and to adjust to being away from what he's used to do, to being away from the luxury that he's used to.
Patricia, you were monitoring Oscar Pistorius quite closely today, and to see him whisked away in an armoured vehicle surrounded by so many police officers, what was the reaction that you'd gauged from the so many people were almost surrounding this armoured vehicle and chasing it down Madiba Street as Oscar Pistorius was coming here to Kgosi Mampuru prison?
Well, one thing for sure is when you are in that situation, you really cannot get used to the media frenzy. And it's not only the media frenzy. At that point in time, it's members of the public, it's school children who still see Oscar Pistorius as, their hero, and they all want to get the glimpse of the athlete. Whether he is being whisked away by the police or not, the fact is the public interest remains extremely high. And I think for most people who were there, even for us journalists, it really just made you think, this is somebody that we all used to adore, and now he literally fell from grace, and he is, taken away by cops under high security, taken to a prison. And this is something that you don't always expect, but it just shows that crime touches us all. And again, going back to Judge Masipa's, verdict, where she said today there needs to be a message sent to society that there are no different laws. There's not a law for the poor and a law for the rich. Law, is for all of us, regardless of your status in, your particular country.
Yeah, I want to come back to when it all started to unravel for Oscar Pistorius. First of all, we saw when Judge Kgosi Masipa was throwing out the testimony of Annette Vergeer, as well as the testimony of the Correctional Services social worker, where she literally said that she was disappointed in the wealth of experience that Vergeer has, and she didn't basically have the facts, and that her interpretation of what the correctional services sector is like is far-fetched from what she had painted inside that court. Is that when we really got to see which way the wind was blowing, if I may?
Certainly, Criselda, we've seen Judge Kgosi Masipa come harshly on witnesses and really being critical at the evidence they've given in court. We even saw that during the judgment itself, where she took a look at some of the witnesses and even, criticized the fact that some of them have gotten some of the sounds wrong, and they've gotten their facts really incorrect, or they've confused their facts. We saw that again happening today, and of course, that being clear indications of the type of sentence or the route that Judge Kgosi Masipa was going to take in this sentencing procedures. We saw her coming hard on that probation officer, Annette Vergeer, saying that she's really disappointed that a 20-year with 20 years experience in the field, she would give such evidence in court which is outdated, and evidence that is really really old evidence. She even said to the fact that she deems her action as irresponsible before court, and really came out hard against Annette Vergeer. Obviously, she also praised the acting National Commissioner of Correctional Services for also conveying the information, giving us the correct picture of what the prisons are like, saying that he did not only praise the prison system, but he also highlighted the fact that there were some difficulties that they were facing. Obviously, we're seeing Judge Kgosi Masipa really looking at those witnesses in detail and closely in considering a verdict.
Patricia, back to emotions again. Oscar Pistorius, very stone-faced inside court. Not a single tear. Not the emotional Pistorius that we've seen throughout this trial. Judge Kgosi Masipa definitely saying she needs to take into account, society's reaction to all of this, and in particular, the testimony from Kim Martin. She's about the only voice that we got of Riva Steenkamp, that this family has suffered so much. She said she needed to take that into account. She could visibly, of course, see that Kim Martin was still very traumatized by what had happened to Riva Steenkamp, and the emotions and the difficulty that the Steenkamps were going through really came across in Kim Martin's testimony. Do you think there was a crucial part as well for Judge Kgosi Masipa in weighing up how all of this has affected the Steenkamps?
Certainly, it cannot have been easy for Judge Masipa, because at the end of the day, she had to consider everybody. But of course, I think her priority lied with the victim. Who was the victim in the whole saga? And that was Riva Steenkamp. She is no more. But as she also highlighted in her sentencing, that, South Africa has moved away from the impression of an eye for an eye. We also need to look after the needs of the accused, and that's where rehabilitation comes in. But of course, you can't, just wish the feelings of the Steenkamp family away. They are, extremely touched by this, and we saw that in the emotional testimony of the Kim Martin, who, in a nutshell, just came to remind all of us who was the priority, basically reminding us that should we not take Riva Steenkamp into consideration, we all would have failed her memory.
All right, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Absolutely stunning work by both of you, colleagues there, Manqoba Mchunu, as well as Patricia Fasaki. And of course, we heard very briefly from the Steenkamps just after court, who were saying that they're relieved all of this is over. We heard June Steenkamp saying she was exhausted by all of this. And the Pistorius are saying, well, they respect the rule of law. It's now time for Oscar Pistorius to pay his dues to society, and this is exactly where that is going to take place. The first night that Oscar Pistorius spends in a hospital unit here at the Kgosi Mampuru prison here in Pretoria, of course in a single cell.